Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, October 18th, 2025. I hope you've got your Halloween costumes all sorted out. Halloween candy is very expensive this year, and I don't think that's an accident. I noticed chocolate increasing in price a lot in mid-end of the summer, etc. And it's only getting more expensive, so it's very interesting to watch. But they're squeezing out lots of money for Halloween, and I think they're trying to make it too expensive for people to continue. Like people are going to be like, oh, that Halloween thing, we're not going to do that. I think it's a soft cultural attack, but I'm just speculating. The United Nations carbon tax was stopped by Team Trump, and we're going to start there because it has to do with trade and China and a whole bunch of other stuff, and I think it's all kind of intertwined, and I think that the worldwide carbon tax being implemented by the United Nations is certainly of Canadian concern if you want to be up on what's going on, so I think we're going to start there. Poilievre's talking about SNC-Lavalin. 5 years too late. SNC, like, wasn't it 2018, 2019 when this whole scandal was hitting? Jody Wilson-Raybould, and we wouldn't need a new attorney general if Scott Bryson hadn't resigned, and all sorts of crazy stuff. This is a decade-old scandal now, and Poilievre is bringing this up. But yeah, it matters, and the Sam Cooper saying it's current, and what's going on then, what happened then impacts now. And again, I don't think he's all that incorrect there. 1,000 RCMP officers can't even be hired and trained because the current configuration can barely keep up with the attrition, the leaving officers being replaced with new ones. It can't, 1,000 new officers, we can't get 10 new officers because of the rate we're losing officers and the rate we can train them. So pretty wild, right? Nord Stream pipeline investigation dies, and gun confiscation program has been shelved for another year. They'll have more amnesty until next year. Thank you very much. Vote for the Liberals again. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We're going to be starting with Trump. And what did Trump do? Trump derailed the United Nations' ability to unilaterally impose taxes on the whole world. And according to this guy, he says that the U.S. aid funding, which was going to fund all sorts of conflicts, both sides of conflicts, was going to be that Trump shut that down, right? This fund, this United Nations carbon tax fund, was meant to replace it, right? That U.S. aid funding. So John says, I can't share the details on how Michael Waltz and Secretary Rubio have, in just a few days, organized the greatest opposition to the United Nations policy since the Cold War and blocked this United Nations carbon tax. I can't say it was a knife fight to the end. Or I can say it was a knife fight to the end. Quote, I've been in this industry 30 years and I've never seen anything like it. One shipping executive told me today, you just don't say no to these guys. It's unheard of. It's unclear who these guys are, but I suspect the European families with shipping investments and net wealth that far exceeds Elon Musk's. Think Zim. Right? Zim's a shipping manufacturer that's just massive. They also moved their offices out of 9/11 on 9/10. So weird, right? Just weird coincidence, weird thing to do, but I digress. Absolutely none of the maritime experts I interviewed early this week thought the U.S. could pull this off. Zero. Massive amounts of money, NGO influence, diplomatic threat, media manipulation were behind this, and the American media, except this one and Fox News, were dead silent, and yet Trump did it. That Trump Truth post sent shockwaves through the building. One UN delegate in London told me nobody expected it. The Secretary General looked like a deer in headlights this morning. Incredible. Simply incredible work by Team Trump, and a massive blow to the European deep state who planned to use this tax as a slush fund to plug holes in the U.S. aid funding for globalist NGOs. Promises made, promises kept. So yeah, the globalist NGOs seem to be having holes blown in their lifeboat, and Canada keeps handing them patches and pumps and all sorts of stuff. And then Canada tries to tell us that they're, I don't know, helping somehow, but I don't think so. I don't think that's what they're doing. Unusual Wales is noting there's trade disputes happening between China and the China and the United States. And because of these trade tensions, things seem to be, well, you can feel it in the air, right? There's a little tension in the air. And the United States wants rare earth metals, and they want a reliable stream of rare earth metals, and they used to get them from China. And China is now locking those down and has said as much. And Trump said this is effectively a fiscal attack. We're gonna deal with this in a fiscal way. And so China has tried to soften their opinion or soften their position, but Trump has not. And Trump is, in fact, doubling and tripling down. And Unusual Whales says, U.S. trade officials, China is taking actions as though they want to decouple. And I want to remind you, and I'm going to remind you in just a second, that decoupling from China, Trump used this in his first term as language in his first term. So I don't know if this is Team Trump manipulating and taking the lead on telling the story, right? Taking the narrative, or what? Unusual Whales says the U.S. has drafted countermeasures if negotiations fail with China. So here's just a little bit of going back in time. The Harvard Business Review is talking in 2021 about the strategic challenges of decoupling with China. And it says, for U.S. politicians and the public, shortages of N95 masks and other key medical equipment at the beginning of the coronavirus crisis highlighted just how dependent the United States had become on production in China. The Trump administration's aggressive policy toward China was broadly popular, despite potential negative side effects. In the first 10 months of 2020, the exact phrase decouple from China or decoupling from China appeared in 3 times as many articles as in the previous 3 years combined. So this was at the beginning of 2020. Trump was in charge of the U.S. until oh wait, maybe not. Biden, was it Biden? So this was a Biden era. Decoupling from China would be Biden. Trump would only be in charge until January 21st in 2020, and then Biden's in, right? And so, or does Biden start in 2021? My gosh, I can't remember. Either way, they're using this language, and this is a return to that language. Okay, so I thought that was an interesting point, and I'm sorry that I can't remember which way that works. Darn, because they say the 2020 election. And then Biden would have started in 21, right? Yeah. So that's Trump's language returning to Trump's language, which is what I thought. Okay. Gov.exe says, sorry, everyone. This is more focused on Canadian trade, but this is Mel Jolie talking about dealing with trade and Trump, and they're clear-eyed on what needs to be done. But we've heard the same kind of story before. It doesn't seem like they're clear-eyed on what needs to be done. It seems like, I mean, I understand what needs to be done. Put dairy on the table. Stop being stupid and stop undermining the United States' position out with the rest of the world and with the rest of the G7. And then maybe we'll get somewhere. But until we start acting more in line with good faith partners, we're not going to make any headway because we're not acting like people who can be trusted, right? So anyway, here's Mel Jolie talking about Trump, and there's a question with regards to how the trade negotiations are going. And so here we go.
For me to answer your questions. Okay, you're not saying specifically at the border, you mean the trade tensions. Okay. Well, I think what you saw last week was a positive conversation, a respectful one. Well, we're eyes wide open and we understand the task that is extremely real and important for Canadians to be able to solve. That's why the Minister of Canada Trade Relations, Dominic LeBlanc, is in Washington with Michael Sabia, the clerk of the Privy Council, and we'll let the negotiations continue. Meanwhile, we can protect, we can create, and we can attract to build one strong economy, because at the end of the day, there are things we can't control, there are things we can control, so we'll focus on what we can control.
I don't think that they are focused on things they can control. They're doing things pretending that they can control Canadians' market for electric cars and things like that. They're pretending that, well, they are trying to implement their will, pretending that they can control us at a very, very micro level, control us, the population. And I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that's pretty brutal. Rhonda says, Mark Carney promised 1,000 new CBSA agents, but even the union president says it's not going to happen. So this is the details on what I was talking about before. Here we go.
Considering you started your testimony with commending the current government on a promise, and the promise was 1,000 border agents, and you said that was a strong start. Given that, what would your vision be then for how soon that obligation could be fulfilled?
Thank you for the question. Right now, I do not believe it can really be fulfilled. We have one training center that can train under 600 new officers per year, which is about what our attrition is per year. So there's no way you get 1,000 additional from that. My understanding is that there's a $20 million proposal with the CBSA to expand the training facility in Chilliwack. My understanding is also that that is on hold. It has not been approved. I've heard talks of expansions at Rigaud. I know there's ideas of spots that were available in Windsor as well, but so far we're just stuck with that one training center. So I don't know how we're going to get our numbers up right now.
Okay, thank you. So you're not sure how we're going to get the numbers up. Neither are we. In previous testimony, we've seen that really the plan hasn't really even started yet as to how that's going to happen. There's been a lot of talk. Would you say that, given that the process of creating a plan to hire those 1,000 agents, is it fair to say that it's a bit of a pie in the sky promise?
Pie in the sky would be an expression that could be used. I think it might be a little bit more long than short term in terms of achievability. I think the CBSA is looking at perhaps not hiring 1,000 additional full border services officers, but hiring lesser positions, downloading duties onto newly created FB1 positions that they are deeming administrative, we are very concerned actually do the work of a border services officer. We have the CBSA now is undergoing a review of accommodated officers who cannot be armed, where they're essentially telling them that you are going to self-demote or we're going to show you the door. These are in many instances people who've injured themselves on the job. That's how our employer is treating them right now. It's deplorable, but it looks really like just a cost-saving measure. So we're really concerned when we hear 1,000. We want to make sure that that's 1,000 actual border services officers.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Wow. So it's not even just that they're not going to hire 1,000 border service guards. They're going to hire somebody else and get them to do the border service guard job for less. So our government is a very, very bad employer, right? If there was a glass door for government jobs, is there a glass door for government jobs? There might be. Glass door is like you rate your employer, and you can do it open or closed. I think you can give them a rating, and you don't have to give your name publicly, I think. Although that could be wrong. That could be outdated information. I don't go on Glassdoor very often. I just know of it. So anyway, who knows? But wild. Here is the food professor, and he says the car industry is hurting, and so is food manufacturing. Our economy is being strangled, held underwater. It's not dead yet, but it's making eye contact and like meaningfully saying, help me out of the water. Otherwise, the whole economy is going to be, right? And so it's not good where we're at. And America's economy is doing quite well. Canada's economy is not doing very well at all. And that's not great. And it's because of bad investments. The government has spent billions of dollars meant to return a lot of money to the economy in the form of jobs, in the form of product that will be then sold, and that company can churn more jobs and things like that, right? Because if you make something and nobody buys it, then you don't have a business. You just have a bunch of junk you made. But if you make something and people buy it and they want more and they need service on it and all this other stuff, now you've got a soup, right? Now you've got things cooking and things are going to actually go on. And our government puts money into Potemkin villages. Potemkin villages are like pretend cutout villages that look like they're real villages from far away, or if you look at them from a specific angle. But if you do any amount of investigative work, you find out that it's fake, right? It doesn't exist at all. Like the buildings behind Mark Carney when he was announcing all those housing things, the housing initiatives and stuff, all of that was fake, like that. So our government invests in things. So what's supposed to happen is the government spends $13 million, and that $13 million turns into $100 million of economic activity, right? And all that $13 million is justified because of $100 million of economic activity that happened around that, right? So that includes things like restaurants to serve the plant, or things like that, like restaurants nearby where people go for lunch. That's a whole That's somebody's whole livelihood, right? Can be. And so all of that economic activity is worth that $13 million investment for all of that action, right? And so, but that's not happening when you invest money into a battery plant that just moves to the United States like Brookfield did. And Brookfield is, of course, Mark Carney's old company that he was the CEO for. He moved them to the United States and then he became the Prime Minister of Canada. For sure. Definitely nothing suspect there. Anyway, Aaron Gunn says, here's more examples of bad spending and bad policies on our government's behalf. Aaron says, seriously? The Liberal government is now spending $3 million of taxpayer money to subsidize female farmers in Nicaragua because climate change? Many Canadians are struggling just to make ends meet. Wasteful spending like this needs to end. So we are spending a whole bunch of money, and the return on the money for Canadians, what do we get as a Canadian, as a dude in my garage doing all the things that I like to do? What do I get for spending this $3 million for female Nicaraguan farmers? Why? Like, what? Are the female Nicaraguan farmers in Nicaragua or are they in Canada? I need to ask, are they in hotels in Canada? Because if so, that's a different thing altogether. I can understand how that relates to Canada somehow. Franco says, everybody across the country should be concerned about what's going on with our government and their ability to, or their handle on finances, because they don't seem to have a handle on finances. Here's these guys.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think everyone across the country should be concerned, right? Because the numbers we're looking at, like I've been with the Parliamentary Budget Office for the past 17 years. Before that, I spent like over 10 years putting together budgets in the Department of Finance and the Bank of Canada and the Treasury Board. And it's a really challenging situation where, again, if we stick with the status quo, we're in a situation where things won't naturally get better on their own. And that's why we indicated, like, everyone, it's like the current forecast, the baseline forecast, not including the additional spending that isn't really concrete at this point, but the directions the government has indicated they want to go in, it definitely raises concerns regarding sustainability. And I think for a lot of folks, like, they know, like, you manage a household budget, you have to make decisions, and you know that, okay, 1 year to the next or 1 month to the next, you might have an unexpected expense. You might have to borrow a bit of money, take down some of your money, cash out of savings, borrow some money from a friend or a neighbor, something from a line of credit. And you expect that, okay, well, I'll be able to pay it back, right? So I'll be able to save a little bit more, like scrimp a little bit on vacation or so, what have you. So you'll end up in a better situation where the money's paid back and you're definitely operating in a sustainable way. And so for us, looking at the baseline it's before the government tables the budget on November 4th, the current baseline we're on definitely raises concerns regarding sustainability. And on our end, we certainly anticipate that the government is going to be making announcements leading up to the budget, and certainly as part of the budget, that are going to address that.
Sustainability and the Canadian spending, the proclivity for our leaders to just spend money we don't even have on what? Things that don't work. Like these projects that Anita Anand is trying to sell. And I don't believe, well, Kirk says Foreign Affairs Minister Anand says there are 10 national large projects that people are wanting to sign on to. And he says, are these 10 projects in the room with us right now? Right? So the only thing announced are 5 projects that have been in the works for years already. So these are fictional. And if they're not fictional, please produce some kind of evidence.
I'm not sure if you've heard, but we have 10 large national projects, including wind, including LNG, including nuclear energy with the development of an SMR at the Darlington nuclear plant. Countries around the world are asking how they can invest in these projects, and we welcome the interest.
SMRs have already not worked in Australia. And if they're not working in Australia, they're sure as heck not working in Canada. It's just not going to happen. We are at 19 minutes. Should we start? Okay. Michelle is talking about, yesterday they're attacking Pierre Poilievre for talking about the SNC-Lavalin stuff. And here's the RCMP guy saying, we investigated our SNC-Lavalin and there was nothing to see there. And Pierre Poilievre's a silly goose. And isn't he dumb? LOL, LOL, right? And it's interesting because Michelle says, she forgot the follow-up question. Who appointed you? Who do you directly report to? The Liberal Prime Minister, the one standing right behind you, right here, right? You can't see his terrible teeth, but he's right there. The conflict of interest is unbelievable. Just waiting for Jody Wilson-Raybould to weigh in. And so people are upset because Tokyo Rosie highlights this. The RCMP had enough evidence to charge Justin Trudeau with fraud in the Aga Khan scandal, but didn't. Canada's legacy media had a huge story to investigate, but didn't. There's been a sustained effort by Canada's institutions to keep Trudeau out of jail. Why? Well, he's the Prime Minister, so the institutions are protecting him, and I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that's the nature of the party's going to protect him. Parliament. If people think that the Prime Minister is a criminal, they're going to lose faith in the government, right? So that's a national security issue. We've got to make sure, the public thinks this, not that, right? And so that would be why. That would be what they're protecting, if you ask me. Here is 401. And he says, Pierre was right. The RCMP confirms Trudeau obstructed the investigation. This is 6.5 minutes. This is from Michael Cooper, who's sharing this October 17th. So that's yesterday. He says, Justin Trudeau broke the law in SNC and abused his power to cover it up. Watch the RCMP confirm that Trudeau obstructed the investigation into his criminal wrongdoing. And Chrissy says, Justin Trudeau should be in jail, not on a yacht with Katy Perry. He obstructed. I was going to make a Dylan Mulvaney joke there. I saw a meme that said AI, whatever, something had looked at this image and determined that it wasn't actually it wasn't actually Katy Perry. It was Dylan Mulvaney that Justin Trudeau was hugging, and I thought that was pretty funny. Regardless, back to this. Justin Trudeau should be in jail. He obstructed the investigation to his own criminal wrongdoings. The proof is out. Lock him up. And yeah. Is anything going to happen right after we fix the 2020 election in the United States? All of this is going to be dealt with. So any day now. Of course, I'm kidding. But, right after the biolabs in Ukraine get exposed and dealt with, we're going to have a digital prison before any of this happens. I mean, come on, guys, right? Like this is a situation where they're not interested in putting bad people in jail for breaking the law. They're interested in implementing their digital gulag tax farm that they can just bilk off for the rest of eternity. It seems like that's the game here. Sam Cooper says, oh man, we should kill the stream, but I'm having too much fun. Sam Cooper says, I agree with this take. And Alan says, there's no doubt that there was a serious wrongdoing in the SNC-Lavalin affair. Well, I think that's an understatement. An obvious disinterest in investigating it among the senior ranks of the RCMP. Nothing to see there. Everybody knows that the RCMP gets super disinterested when you have to investigate anything, related to government, right? So move on, citizen, right? Totally fine, Alan. Okay. I just don't think Canadians, given all the challenges they're facing today, because of the issues today, we can't go back and deal with all of the criminality of yesterday that we know happened. Obviously, that's a crazy thing, and we should focus on today. Okay. They're facing today are much interested in retaliating or relitigating yesterday's scandal. It's not a winning issue for the CPC. Well, I agree it's not a winning issue necessarily for the CPC. To say SNC-Lavalin happened and holy cow, we just noticed it. That's definitely a losing issue for the CPC. But possibly going after the people who did that criminally might be a winning issue because it'll signal you're willing to do something, for crying out loud. Did you notice the full-blown invasion of the country? The CPC? No? Oh my gosh. Sam Cooper says, I agree with this take. Canadians don't care. It's ancient history. By the same token, to the extent Ottawa media even matters anymore, the gaslighting, i.e. couch fainting, how dare he claim the RCMP can't investigate leaders, is pathetic. I'm saying, Sam Cooper says, I'm saying it's a concern. It's a present concern, not a past concern. And the Ottawa columnists and political insiders, for various reasons, don't want it to be a concern. But Alan is correct that SNC-Lavalin, absent some new explosive leaks, won't move the needle. Explosive leaks like arrests Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau were arrested on SNC-Lavalin charges. Katy Perry, accessory after the fact. She was aware, right? So that would create some buzz. That would create something. I'm kidding, but I'm just saying we could create all the buzz we need. Canadian Border Services Agency is taking action to protect our economy. The CBSA is investigating whether certain imports of disposable paper plates and bowls and platters from China are being sold at unfair prices in Canada, being dumped or subsidized, like that Australian beef. Shove says, and he's an MP, I believe, Conservative Member of Parliament for Calgary Heritage, and he says, paper plates, not fentanyl, not secure borders, not stopping illegal guns from coming into our country, paper plates. That's the important border issue of the day for the Liberals, right? So that's, if only we knew how bad it really is, right? Like, that's terrible. And 401 says CBSA officers will investigate disposable paper plate and bowls, not the fentanyl precursors getting dumped into Canada for super labs in BC and Ontario, which are operating at full throttle as we speak. Not the meth we ship to Australia and New Zealand, killing people. Oh, plates. Plates are the important thing here, and not SNC-Lavalin. Nobody's interested in that scandal, right? This current scandal of plates and New Zealand meth and beer and fentanyl, all of these current scandals also don't matter. Nobody's interested in them either, Alan. Nobody's interested in anything, it seems. Larry Brock says Carney's new bail plan is nothing more than smoke and mirrors until the Liberals repeal Bill C-75, principle of restraint. Violent repeat offenders will keep walking free, and Canadians will keep paying the price. And so I think it's funny because Larry Brock and the Conservatives voted for C-5, which got around Bill C-69, which is the No More Pipelines bill. And in doing that, they were saying that we can ignore this bad bill, C-69, and have policies that override this bad bill in some cases. But in this one, he's saying until this bill, C-75, is repealed, you can't fix it. Until Bill C-69 is repealed, C-5 is not going to fix it. I just think it's funny. And with that, we got to say goodbye to the stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. And if not, that's